Okay, next we're going to look at advanced triple blank sentences. So what makes a triple blank particularly advanced? Well, it will be one of the longer ones. So you can spot them if they're 75 plus words, means probably advanced. Complex syntax, the grammar is long and winding. Now, very often there will be advanced vocabulary, but not always. And advanced vocabulary, you can't assume it's going to absolutely dominate these ones. Context is key, just as it would be in any other triple blank sentence. So, with that in mind, let's go through a few tips and tricks to use once you've identified a triple blank sentence by its traits. So there are 6 major tips and tricks I want you to bear in mind as you solve these advanced triple blank questions. First, you want to really zero in on the hardest words and phrases. Those can be the real blockers to your understanding, so try to decode those first. Next, paraphrase all meaning before you fill in the blanks. So, make sure you understand the greater sentence before you drop those words in. Next, do try to think of your own word that might work in a blank, then look for that matching answer. That's a tried and true technique for any triple blank, especially important for these advanced ones. Also, you want to recheck your understanding of the meaning once you fill in the blank. Word goes into the blank and then say, hey, does this still make sense? Do I still understand it? So bear that in mind. Also, and this is very important, you're going to encounter some hard vocabulary words. Don't focus on what you don't know. Focus on the words you do know. Very often, your vocabulary knowledge as is will be enough to get you to the right answer. And as you see these longer, more complicated ones, they might start to feel like a reading comprehension passage, but don't skim, don't scan. You want to read every word, because this isn't like RC where you can just jump over and look at the most important words. Okay, so armed with these tips and tricks, you should be ready to for a walkthrough of a particularly advanced triple blank question. So we're going to look at that next. So here's a nice, very advanced triple blank practice question. And what we're going to do is we're going to solve this step by step. So what I want you to do right now is don't try to actually get the answers just yet. Instead, take a look at this and see if you can find the trickiest turns of phrase, the trickiest words that you want to figure out the meaning of first. Just see if you can identify those. So pause the video and look for those hard words and phrases, and we will talk about this. Okay, now that you're back, let's walk through the paraphrase process together. We'll see if your paraphrase came out basically the same in substance as mine. So, this guy or girl, this narrator, is saying that when they were in high school, they found Mark Twain's work to be witty and finely wrought. We're going to say funny and good. Funny, good. Okay. And so it was funny and good and very blank. So we're not going to look at the blanks for now. And then the person says, because they liked Mark Twain's work so much, they expected to encounter the newly edited editions untrammeled by any prejudice save that of pleasant nostalgia. Well, untrammeled, that's not a very high frequency word, but you don't really need to pay attention to it or even know what it means. They indicated that when they were younger, they loved Mark Twain. And so what would they expect? Well, they'd expect the new editions to be something where they didn't have any prejudice, they didn't have any bias against it, but they felt nostalgic. So they expected to encounter the newly edited editions with no bias, and also liking them, which very much ties into and is obvious based on the earlier part of the sentence. So untrammeled by prejudice, save that of pleasant nostalgia, just means they expected not to be biased against them or dislike them, right? Okay, so we've really boiled that one down. And then we're going to look at what they're saying is, as they got older, by maturity, we're going to say age. Age brought with it something related to the adequacy of humor to address life's profoundest tragedies. Well, that just means tragedy. So the adequacy of humor to address tragedy. Okay, so for a real reckoning with these topics, what's a reckoning mean? It means meeting or addressing. So, for a real reckoning means to address. To address these topics. One must turn to soberer. Well, that's an odd word, but you know what sober means. It means serious, so soberer would mean more serious. But you have to stop and think about it because it's a less common word. Stylistically inferior. The writing style isn't as good. That means the writing is not as good. So his later work was not as good. So we've paraphrased all the most difficult parts of this, and with that you can look it over and kind of put the whole thing into plain speak. So let's do that right now. Okay, so we have a full paraphrase, but the blanks are still empty. I've only paraphrased the stuff outside of the blanks. So what I want you to do right now is look at this full paraphrase, which again is hopefully similar to your own, and I want you to put your own words into the blanks, and then we'll see if we can find the words in the answer choices that match your own words. So pause the video, try to put your own words into the blanks, and then we'll talk about that part of the process. Right, so let's take a closer look at this. So, blank 1, you can probably look at the immediate context and figure it out. Basically, it's saying that Mark Twain's fiction is funny and good. So whatever's going to be in the blank is going to be positive. So we're going to say something like very attractive. Okay, so we have that. So then the author says that they assumed they would have no bias against the new editions of the book other than really liking them. So they're not going to feel any bias. But then they're saying getting older has blank, but blank. So this but indicates that something unexpected has happened and that there's some kind of contrast. Okay, so for these two blanks, we have to keep looking at the context to figure out exactly what's going on here. So getting older has done one thing to the appreciation of Twain's early work, but also getting older has given the person an idea about humor. So then we look at some ideas about later writing that's more serious. And it's better. Better as what? Better at dealing with tragedy. So if the writing is more serious and more serious writing is better at dealing with tragedy, then we're looking at doubt, probably, about the ability of humor. Doubt about the ability of humor to deal with tragedy. So we have doubt about for the third blank. But what about the appreciation? Has that appreciation changed or not changed? Well, the person says that they liked Mark Twain's work because it was funny. And then they say the later work is more serious and also isn't as good in terms of style. It deals with tragedy better, but the writing actually isn't as good. So that indicates that this person probably still likes Mark Twain's work best for its humor. So what we want to see in the second blank is not changed. Now, my handwriting's a little messy here, so let's go to a clean, nicely typed set of our own words in the blanks here. Okay, yeah, so we've got that. We've got the idea of something related, basically something attractive in the first blank, not changed in the second blank, and then doubt regarding something in the third blank. So at this point, what we can really do is do that comprehension check at the end that I talked to you about, where we look for equivalent words in the blanks, and we make sure that once we look at the prompt as a whole, it still makes sense. So let's do that right now. Pause the video, see if you can find equivalent words in the blanks to the paraphrased words we've put in here, and then we'll talk about this. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Now, there's a lot of words in these blanks that are low frequency, so you might not recognize the words, you might not be too familiar with them, but you can still use what you do know about vocabulary, remember what I told you, to get to the correct answers. So blank one, we want something that means attractive. Well, let's say you're not sure about any of these words. Maybe you know one or two of them, but worst case scenario, you don't know these words. Well, horror, that's a root form for horrible, horrific, horror. So this is presumably something negative, not attractive. And then we have unprepossessing. Well, we have not, un means not, and possessing would mean like gripping or pulling you in. If something is not pulling you in, it's probably not very attractive. There we get beguiling. And beguiling means attractive in a way that does pull you in. But even if you didn't know that meaning, you can get that by process of elimination. Okay, so blank 2, not changed. Well, we should zero right in on not, in the not dimmed, because that's probably correct. Also dimmed, if you have this bright, burning, wonderful enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is bright, right? So if the enthusiasm hasn't changed for Mark Twain's work, we can say it has not dimmed. And you can zero in on that on the correct answer. Somewhat tempered means just changed a little bit. So that doesn't quite work because we want not changed. And largely diminished obviously means a significant change, so we can rule that out. Now let's look at blank 3. So, doubt about. Well, let's look at something. A partial vindication of. Maybe you don't know vindication, so we'll skip that for now. A full embrace of, well, if you're fully embracing something, you're saying, I'm all about this. I don't doubt this at all. So that's the opposite of what you want. Serious misgivings about. Well, there's no high-frequency words here. You should know that misgivings means doubts. So that's clearly true. Clearly the correct answer. Partial vindication of. You can eliminate that just by process of elimination, but just so you know, vindication means proving something is correct. So this would kind of be the opposite of what we want. We want doubts, not something partially being proven true. We want somebody doubting it's true at all. So we can get to the blanks and the answer choices that way. Now, let's go back to the original question. Remember what I said about once you paraphrase this all in your head, you want to go back and make sure it still all makes sense to you and that your answers are clicking. And more to the point, you want to be able to look at one of these and do the process we just went through, but do it more quickly. Maybe with a few light notes, but not the slow walk-through process we just did. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is we're going to walk through this original question now and make sure that everything checks out. Remember, for the answers we chose beguiling, we chose not dimmed, and we chose serious misgivings about. Does this make sense when we set aside our paraphrase and look at the original question with full understanding? Okay, so as a high school student, basically I liked Mark Twain, so I found it to be very beguiling. That checks out. It's not horrible. It's not failing to possess and pull in. Okay, so that works. Thus, I expected to encounter the newly edited editions untrammeled by any prejudice, not having bias, basically, except maybe liking it because they liked it as a kid. Okay, but something unexpected happened. We have these shift words, however and although. So that's interesting because we have kind of a double shift. Something is unexpected, but at the same time, the although indicates that something else was expected. So, although my maturity has what? Well, not dimmed. Like we said before, not dimmed how much they liked it, how much they found it bright and witty and finely wrought. Well, that perception of brightness and good writing, that enthusiasm has not dimmed. And we can confirm that not dimmed is correct because they're talking about their appreciation of Twain's early style, which was more humorous and not like its soberer, more serious later style. So they like Twain for its humor, for its being witty originally. They still like Twain for its humor, so things have not dimmed. But they say, however, now that I'm older, I have blank about the ability humor has to address life's profoundest tragedies, to address tragedy. So they're saying, I think something different about how humor addresses tragedy. I don't like the humor as much in one respect. Well, for a real reckoning, for a good way to address tragedy, those topics, you have to look at the more serious stuff, even if the style isn't as much fun, even if the style is inferior. So what they're really saying is they like the humor. More serious stuff is not as good in terms of style, but it does a better job addressing tragedy. So they're saying seriousness addresses tragedy, humor doesn't. So again, we see that they're having doubts. They're having serious misgivings about the adequacy of humor. So we've done a quick recap of all the paraphrasing we've done to refine our understanding of this advanced triple blank. In the process, we've done the very necessary double check for comprehension at the end of the entire process. So what are some big ideas that we can take away from this? Well, comprehension checks and paraphrasing are key to advanced triple blanks, and you want to do these even more rigorously than you do on regular triple blanks. And you want to check for comprehension as you go. Think, okay, what are the hardest phrases? Okay, do I understand those? Now do I understand this sentence? And then check again at the end, where you reassess, does my paraphrase really work now that I'm thinking again about the original wording? And again, you do not need to understand every difficult word in the advanced triple blank. You saw that I walked you through ways to make educated guesses at what the correct words are, even if you're dealing with some really advanced vocabulary that you're not sure about. And of course, focus on whole meaning. You don't want to just focus on the individual meanings of words, or you can get lost and stumped and hung up on an unfamiliar word or a word you're misinterpreting. And above all, don't be afraid to take notes. For some of the simpler text completions or sentence equivalences on the GRE, taking notes can just slow you down. But for these advanced ones, you're looking at a whole paragraph. Every single word counts. Taking a few light notes could actually be pretty good and could help see you through to the end of all this. So I hope this has been helpful. And yeah, definitely feel free to review this video anytime you're working on a tricky advanced triple blank and need a little bit of a skills boost.